Welcome to today's Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month webinar. I'm Lisa Jerram, APTA's Director for Bus Programs and Emerging Vehicle Technologies. I'm pleased to be kicking off the latest in this webinar series. Today we're focused on Sacramento Regional Transit and its integration with local micromobility services. So before we get started, I want to let you know that you will be able to find today's webinar, the slides and materials related to Sacramento RT's micromobility initiative, along with the other resources that are available through APTA's Mobility Innovation Hub on apta.com. You'll be able to watch this webinar again and share the link with others. So we urge you to go to the Mobility Innovation Hub often to find information, resources, tools, and best practices to help you navigate the changing mobility landscape. Each month, we highlight a new and innovative approach to service delivery or technology deployment so you can learn from what your peers are doing around mobility innovations. And we also make available in each case the contracts or data sharing agreements, procurement documents, or promotional materials, whatever is relevant from the case study that might be useful to you as you consider similar ideas in your own community. These Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month webinars are part of a broader set of webinar offerings available through APTA-U. So please do check the schedule of upcoming webinars and mark your calendars and send us your ideas and suggestions for future content. So I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have David Zipper of DZ Strategies, Henry Lee, General Manager and CEO at Sacramento Regional Transit, and Chris Flores, Special Assistant at Sacramento Regional Transit. And David, I'll turn the webinar over to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Lisa, and thanks to everyone for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us to talk about what I think is a really interesting topic, the integration of micromobility services, e-bikes, e-scooters and the like with public transportation. We've got a lot of interest in this at APTA. For those that haven't had a chance to meet yet, I work with APTA on technology and mobility, and I've had the pleasure of leading these Pilot of the Month webinars for, I guess, this is, I believe, the fourth or fifth that we've done over the course of this year. And it's always a real pleasure. I want to thank the Sacramento team for joining us today for it. So on the next slide. If you want to go deeper into the topics that we'll be discussing today, there is a memo, a 3-page memo that is available on the APTA Mobility Innovation Hub that Lisa just mentioned. You can get an overview and you can download it and share it with others about what Sacramento has been doing with micromobility, why they've done it, and some initial outcomes. Next slide. And you can also get a couple documents that that Sacramento RT has been kind enough to share with us. There are some partnership documents for what Sacramento RT has done with Jump, the e-bike and scooter company owned by Uber, which we'll be talking about in just a few minutes, and also a marketing and promotion agreement between Sacramento RT and Uber. We always try to do this with every Pilot of the Month webinar that we do. We want to make documents available for those of you at transit agencies who might wish to emulate or learn from really what groundbreaking agencies have done, just like Sacramento RT in this case. Next slide. So we're about to go through the presentation and have a conversation in just a moment, actually. We will have some time set aside for questions from you all as the participants. You should see a little question box that's just to the right of your screen. Feel free at any time to type in a question that you have about what we'll be discussing, and Lisa is going to be taking a look at questions you're submitting, and we'll get to as many of them as we can over the course of the webinar today. So with that, without further ado, let's dive into it, and I'll turn things over to Henry and Chris in Sacramento, and please paint us a picture of what all you guys are doing out in California. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, David, and let's go to the next slide. We're honored to share our integrated micromobility experience with our peers. I'm Henry Lee, General Manager, CEO of Sacramento Regional Transit, SACRT. For background, SACRT is the predominant transit agency in the Sacramento region, covering 400 square miles, and we are made up of the county and the cities within Sacramento. Next, please. We carry over 22 million rides annually on our fixed routes bus, light rail, paratransit, and microtransit services. Our light rail system has 52 stations, 43 miles of track, and 3 rail lines. We carry about 90% of the 6-county region's transit trips and have an operating budget of $193 million and a capital budget of $232 million in fiscal year 2020. In less than a month, we will launch our newly redesigned bus network, which is the first comprehensive overhaul of the bus routes in over 30 years. Next, please. We use over 600 vehicles, including 97 light rail cars, and we employ over 1,300 individuals or staff. Our light rail operates at 15 minutes frequency. The service begins as early as 4 a.m. and continues to as late as 12:30 at night. Next. Since Sacramento provides the transit service in the capital region of California, the 5th largest economy in the world, we are, really a ground zero place for innovation. Our mayors in the region and other regional policymakers have made it abundantly clear that they want to be at the forefront of new technologies and innovation for the entire nation. Today, we're much more than just a bus and light rail service provider. We have become an integrated mobility provider by deploying innovative mobility solutions such as microtransit, which we have the largest ridership, or the most ridership in the nation for the seminar program, microtransit program, micromobility, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and smartphone apps. We tried or experienced all of these new options. So next, I would like to transfer to Chris to talk about our micromobility jump bike integration, which is today's topic. Next
slide. And thank you, Henry. And I'd like to thank the entire APTA team and David for putting this together. It's truly an exciting topic, talking about integration with our transit system. How can we bring micromobility and really provide mobility for all? And so we're happy to share our experiences with you. I'm just going to recap a little bit about Sacramento's bike share history and then kind of talk about our system. So bike share was actually planned in Sacramento since 2013. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, SACOG, had planned this in 2013, and they even did a non-electric bike share preview that launched in 2016. Unfortunately, that had kind of minimal success, but as we know, there's this technology and this has changed the way bike share is kind of done. So they put out a different RFP in 2017, and it was awarded to Jump Bike. And it was in 2018 that Jump Bike entered the Sacramento market, May of 2018. And at the time of deployment, it had 900 bikes and was the largest all-electric bike share system in the nation. We entered into agreement with Jump Bike. Our board approved a licensing agreement in May of 2018 or April of 2018, and we launched our first station docking hub at our Sacramento City College Light Rail Station September 2018. So SacRT, and I'll talk a little bit about the license agreement a little bit later, but we have an agreement with Jump Bike that authorizes 23 docking hubs at SacRT's light rail stations. We have 52 light rail stations on our system so far, and you can go to the next slide, I'm sorry. So far, we have 7 docking hubs that have been installed at our stations with a capacity to hold about 70 bikes. So 10 or so at each station. We're in the permitting process for our 8th station currently. As part of the agreement, Jump pays a $1,000 permit fee to SAC-RT and a monthly electricity charge fee of $5 per hub. Just by way of background, Sacramento is very flat and has about 270 sunny days a year, so it does make it an ideal location for bicycling. Though it can be often warm here in the summer months, so we've noticed that the electric assist has really been something that has attracted people to those to utilize the bicycles. The city truly is making a concerted effort to improve the bicycle infrastructure and working with us on improving first last mile bicycle infrastructure connections, which is very heartening because we do believe that this micromobility integration will be a great way to kind of increase ridership and get people to solve some of that first and last mile solution. Just by way of background on SAC-RT's light rail system, when it was expanding, we were able to acquire right-of-way that was the cheaper right-of-way, but it paralleled freight train tracks. And so that creates a little bit of a first last mile barrier issues on some of our stations. And so we have been strategic about which stations we wanted to place our light rail, the bike racks at, in order to try to increase ridership. And so just for a couple examples, our 65th Street station's been a pretty good success. It's just south of a Sacramento State University campus. The campus is bound by a railroad berm that kind of prevents easy access into the station or into the campus from our station. So we've seen students who have really kind of utilized the service to utilize the bikes to kind of get to classes on campus. Another example would be our 39th Street station. It's located just north of the UC Davis Medical Center. There's a kind of a residential campus, residential neighborhood that is about a half a mile in between those. And so we're seeing a lot of those students medical students take the jump bikes as well as patients. And then we're also seeing a little bit more in the downtown corridor, 16th Street station, where state workers are kind of taking it as a last mile solution. We really want people to feel comfortable that they can leave their cars home and still have mobility options at their fingertips. And actually, Jump released a pretty interesting number that found that Sacramento market is the only market where the bikes generate more rides on a daily basis than their flagship car service Uber. And that's 53% rides on Jump versus 47% on Uber. We're seeing about 6.5 trips per Jump bike on a daily basis. And so we're excited to kind of expand that program.
That's great. So thank you both for that overview. And I agree with you, Chris. I think it's really striking that in Sacramento, maybe because like you were mentioning, it's sunny and it's relatively flat, that you're actually that Uber claims to have more Jump rides taken than Uber car rides. That's a pretty amazing statistic.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Anecdotally, it's been so successful that Jump has actually been expanding. In November 2018, it announced it was going to expand its fleet of vehicles, and then in February, it announced it expanded the service area of where the Jump bikes are allowed to go to include more disadvantaged communities. And so their plan currently is to add 250 Jump bikes every quarter to the system moving forward. And then just by way of background on some additional micromobility in the region, just July, last month, we saw Jump scooters along with Lime scooters enter the Sacramento market. And then we do know there's a suburban bike share program by the Gotcha Group that's going to be coming to the cities of Folsom and Rancho Cordova and Elk Grove as well in the future.
Fair enough. Well, let's just to get some basic information out, go a little deeper into your partnership with Jump, because as of now, that's the one partnership around micromobility that you have. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the one we have a license agreement with.
Yep, got it. So it's interesting. So to be clear, the partnership with Jump focuses on your light rail stations specifically, correct?
Correct. We wanted to see if it could be something that could be a real tool for the first last mile on our light rail. While it's not necessarily a commuter line, it is very heavily trafficked during commute hours. And so we're seeing a lot of commuters kind of take those to the last, place of employment.
And also, we have a plan to install that in some major corridors and bus transfer centers in the future.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. To do bus stations as well. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
and I just want to make sure that it's clear, since you're the only transit agency that I know of in the United States that's doing this right now, I want to make clear to folks what the user experience is like. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that someone could pick up a jump bike wherever they might be in Sacramento or West Sacramento, what have you, ride it for a mile or two to a station where you have these charging bays, dock it there inside the station, and then go board the light rail, and from that point forward, the bike is being charged, correct? And
Correct.
Then someone else can take it and ride it wherever they want to go, whether that's a few minutes later or if it's actually during the evening rush hour and people are going back home. Is that the user experience summed up relatively accurately?
That's exactly right. And I was going to recap it on some of our lessons learned, but I'll mention it now. Is one of the things we have thought about. We want this to be a reliable system for somebody. So we would want to, maybe if we were redoing the licensing agreement, put a provision that would say that Jump would ensure at the beginning of the morning a certain amount of bikes are at each charging hub at a light rail station, because we want the user not to count on this. And if there's no Jump bike there, then how are they going to solve that first last mile connection? But let me just I'll go over a little bit.
Can I just ask you, Chris, real quick? That's an interesting point. Is that a complaint that you've heard from passengers being frustrated that either they can't dock it on the way into the station or they've been unable to get one on their way back when they want to go the last mile?
I don't think we've heard too many complaints on that regard, but it's just something we want to ensure for good service for our customers. Currently, because Jump Bike is focused on more of the central core, they've been deployed over 1,200 bikes. There has been maybe a short walk for some individuals from light rail stations, but we want it to be reliable for them. So we want that user experience to be there as well.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm curious as well, when you started doing the agreement with Jump, how are you thinking about success? How would you know whether or not the partnership worked from the perspective of SAC-RT?
In last couple months, at least last 5 months, we see our light rail ridership increase consistently. From February to June, we see 5% ridership increase, and the last month, July, we saw 18% of ridership increase, compared to previous year's July.
Wow.
We cannot contribute that, all those increase to the Jump Bike, but we think Jump Bike plays a role on our ridership increase.
Yeah, that's certainly really impressive growth. Well, let me ask you, say it makes sense you can't attribute an 18% overall ridership growth to Jump alone, but I'm curious, do you collect any data from Jump about usage of their riders that could help you understand the extent to which it's affecting your own ridership?
We are working with Jump to say how they can share those information with us in the near future. That is exactly the stuff we would like to get that. Thanks for letting us know we need to push them to do that, and we certainly will have some answer later.
But I will say one neat thing Jump does do is they make their general bike share feed specification available. So that allows kind of other tech companies that want to pull and integrate that, and that makes for a good mobility integration. We've seen the transit app. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it's called the transit app, but those, if you pull it up, you'll find our closest, the schedule of our closest bus or light rail, but you'll also see where all the Jump bikes are located on there in Sacramento. And so we're hoping that it can make for more seamless integrated travel. We haven't seen the GBFS published for the scooters that have come just yet, but we're hopeful that will be there because we want to see that integration.
Got it. And one thing too, I think, Chris, you mentioned this briefly, but I think it's important, so I wanted to underscore it. What exactly is Jump paying you for in the agreement?
Yeah, so I want to go just over a few of the details from the license agreement that I thought would be pertinent for others who are on the line. So the agreement is for 5 years, and Jump has an option to extend for another 5 years through a written notice. Jump and SAC-RT may terminate the license for convenience without penalty by providing a 90-day notice. If SAC-RT seeks to remove Jump, Jump must move at its own expense and remove the hubs from our stations within 90 days of termination. Either party may request that a station be added or removed upon providing 30-day written notice to the other party. Hubs must be a minimum 10 feet from the nearest detectable warning tile, so as not to block access for pedestrians, service vehicles, emergency vehicles. Since our starter line was launched with FTA funds, Federal Transit Administration funds, we did have to seek FTA approval for this process. SAC-RT may require Jump to remove any or all of its equipment due to neglect. Jump must ensure that there's safe use of the equipment in and around the docking hub, and that includes ride safe information, such as including and indicating that they may not bring Jump bikes on bus or light rail, and a statement that Jump customers must walk their bikes at the stations. We have provisions in there regarding Jump that they must obtain all the necessary permits and track warrants. SAC-RT does collect $1,000 per docking hub, a one-time fee to cover the permitting costs, and then a $5 monthly usage fee. The provision on the electricity fee allows us to review that, and that's something we're going to do after a year's time to see if that's in the right amount, and we have the ability to raise that with Jump. And Jump is required to clean the area around their hubs twice a week, and if SAC-RT deems that they're not doing that, we could assess a $50 failure for the cleaning issues. So I thought those were some pertinent ones I wanted to share as well.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. Thank you. And also thank you to the Sacramento RT team for making the agreement with Jump available to APTA members. That's on the Mobility Innovation Hub in the memo available for download. But I wanted to ask you, so my understanding is that the charging bays are actually physically within the station. So people are going to be walking by them on the way to light rail or on the way back from it, right? You can't really miss it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they're right at the entrance of those stations to decide. We want it to be a visual reminder, hey, here's another mobility option at your fingertips.
So I'm curious, since so first mile, last mile is a popular use case for micromobility, for scooters and e-bikes. So whether or not, I would imagine, whether or not you did a partnership with Jump or other providers, there were going to be people who were going to take a Jump bike to a light rail station or back from it. So why did you think it would be preferable to have these charging bays or have the bikes be left actually physically within the station as opposed to perhaps on private property a block or so away? What was your thinking on that?
Well, again, we wanted to integrate with mobility and really be that first last mile solution, but we also wanted to get ahead of the game on this. Knowing that people are going to ride the Jump and scooters to our stations, how can we make it so it's an orderly matter? Obviously, we have concerns that Jump bikes, the dockless system, are blocking accessibility or so forth. So we really wanted to make sure that those were not in the way of our customers.
I think it's really about the customer convenience, and the customer can easily get to the bike. And also another thing is, we have our library stations are very big and have lots of extra spaces for those dock stations. And for the private, nearby private, properties, it would be a little bit difficult to sign agreement with those, property owners. And also, it's not convenient for our customers.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm curious. You said you don't have the data now about whether or not Jump is driving ridership directly from Jump, but I'm curious if as you talk to SAC-RT riders or perhaps do surveys, what kind of feedback are you getting about the Jump partnership? Are people saying good things? Are they sort of neutral about it? What kind of feedback are you hearing? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting great feedback from our customers who have called in and from the surveys we've done. The Jump bikes, I don't know if you've ridden an electric assist bike, but they're pretty fun to ride, and customers are enjoying them. So I think we're getting a lot of good feedback. on just having them located at our system and having them available for usage. It's been a very positive integration. And one of the things, just we're always concerned about equity and price points, but jump bikes currently, it's a $1 to ride for first 15 minutes, and then I think it's 7 cents per minute thereafter. But the city of Sacramento did require Jump to deploy 20% of their bikes every morning in disadvantaged communities, and they also have a low-income program, so that for $5 a month, a customer can get 60 minutes of a ride a day, which is a really great deal. And so we're hopeful that continues, and that way individuals can really see us as an affordable option as well.
Great. So I just have a couple more questions, and then we'll turn things over to the audience. But one thing I also wanted to clarify, Chris, you mentioned that Lime is now active in Sacramento, and there's a service called Gotcha in the suburbs. Now, my understanding is that their chargers are not compatible with Jump. So if you want to do a partnership with those companies, Lime and Gotcha, you'd actually need to install, or they need to install, new bays. Is that accurate?
Actually, yeah. So we're actually in discussions with Gotcha currently about locating at a couple Folsom stations and a couple Rancho Cordova stations. And we currently, I believe the agreement will not include charging infrastructure with the docking stations. I believe Gotcha has a model where they would take them off and charge them overnight at a different location. So we don't plan on adding electricity to those bike racks, but making them available. Okay.
And what are you so what are you planning to do next? Are you going to be in terms of micromobility? Do you think you'll be expanding this partnership with Jump to new stations, or are you waiting to get more data? What lies in store?
Yeah, so obviously the Sacramento market's changing with micromobility, with the intro of scooters, and we also have seen there's something in Sacramento called Gig Car Share. It's a free-floating electric car share program where someone can kind of just use it similar to Jump, and we're looking at doing that at a different station, at our Power In light rail station, where it's just north of a manufacturing district that kind of has last mile barriers, doesn't have the road infrastructure to make it safe for walking or biking, and we think this could be a nice little fit. We haven't engaged with the scooters just yet, as they just entered the market, but I think it's something we would like to see how we can integrate them and what our customers want from that. So we're going to be listening to our customers.
And for Jump Bike now, we try to extend that to 23 light rail stations, and we already determined those stations, which will be easy for Jump Bike to install the dock stations. So it's a work in progress.
I see. All right, and my last question before we turn things back over to Lisa, who's going to read out some of your questions, is, just thinking about the transit agency reps who are on the call, what advice do you have for them for things that if you could do it over again, you might do differently with partnerships with a company like a Jump or a Lime or others?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're still less than a year into the program, so we're learning lessons, but we think it's been a great success to integrate. We've gotten great feedback from our customers, and we know, we've heard that they want a variety of mobility options. And we know not everyone's going to take transit, but we thought this could also be a creative way to kind of introduce new riders to our system and be a last mile solution. I think if we were kind of to redo it over again, we might want to include additional, more than $1,000 per charge for docking hub, one-time charge, more in the order of $2,500 or something around there to kind of recoup staff time that was that has been kind of had to be put in, specifically when you're doing the charging or installing the charging infrastructure there. They often had to obtain track warrants where we had to deploy flaggers out there, and so just making sure we capture the full cost of that. Another lesson is you do have to be cautious with partnering with private sector companies, because they could at any moment decide that they want to leave a market, or maybe a business model is changing. We've actually heard that the scooters might be a more profitable model than the bikes, and so that they may be putting more of an emphasis on that. So we just want to be cognizant of that, and then always of accessibility issues. And then I think we're probably going to take an overarching kind of policy. While we have a policy that you can't take jump bikes on our trains, as new bike share or micromobility launches in Sacramento, we think we need an overarching policy of kind of what is allowed, what isn't allowed on our system, so that people are aware of that. And so that's something we'll probably take to the board of directors in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. And then the next slide, again, there's a question box right here. If you haven't already submitted a question, feel free. But Lisa, I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, David. And thanks very much, Henry and Chris. So we do have questions coming in. I'm going to start out with one that follows up on the ridership numbers that you gave us. And the question was just basically, do you have any sense of whether the ridership increase has been different at the stations with this service as opposed to the ones that don't have it?
You know, that's a good question. We haven't gone into the details of each station. That's something we can do after this webinar to kind of to see. But no, we haven't narrowed into the specific stations. But we've seen better ridership on our system throughout the year. And one of the things we recently did is we added 15-minute service on our weekend light rail, and so that frequency, which will also kind of match our new bus network. We completely redesigned our bus network, and that will launch September 8th. So we're thinking the integration of those together with the jump bikes will also lead to more ridership. But we'll definitely look at the stations, because that's a good point to go back to see if we've seen an increase recently.
And we are going to, well, like Chris already said, we're going to have the free students, program implemented, October 1st, means from K to 12 grade students within our entire system, they will be able to ride for free, and we will see significant ridership increase from that initiative. So it's going to be very complicated to, isolate the individual reason for the ridership increase.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a pretty exciting program that you have, though, so I want to check back in and see how your ridership is in 6 months or a year. We had a bunch of questions relating to the fare payment part of this. You talked a little bit about what Jump's charging, but the questions have to do with, are there any kind of discounts either from the transit side or from Jump side, or do you just pay, the full fare of each when you use the service? And then related to that is, have you integrated the Sacramento RT payment with Jump in some way?
Yeah, so we don't have an integration. We have a mobile fare app ourselves, and we've been looking at ways to integrate other mobility options, and we've been talking to our tech provider on that one to see how we can integrate further for that. But the transit app is one that's a pretty good integration. But no, we don't have any further integration on the app besides what they make available for those to publish.
But we plan to say if we can use our mobile app to not just pay for the jump bike and our fixed route system, and also other like a micro transit too, and other options. So eventually try to really use that to build the mobility as a service, use one single payment system. That is where the action where actively try to implement, but that may take a little bit of time.
And just to underscore, this is David. It sounds like the answer is to answer the question directly that was posed. If someone's taking a jump bike to a Sacramento RT station, they're paying the full cost of the jump ride and then the full cost of the transit trip, both, correct?
That is correct. We would like to do a promo in the very near future with them, and we're in those discussions. We did do a program previously with TNC Networks when our downtown arena opened here in Sacramento in 2017, where it was a subsidized ride to and from light rail stations on those transportation network companies. So we're looking maybe a similar type model.
Yeah, it's a good question who posed it, and to tie things back to the previous pilots of the month. A couple of months ago, we did a session with Denver RTD that actually in Denver, it's the one place in the United States where you can do this now on the Uber app. you could get a jump micromobility vehicle as well as an Uber trip, but you can also buy a transit ticket. That's the only place I know of where you can do that at the moment. Frankly, if there's other people on the call who know of other places, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to learn more about it.
We very much want to do things like that, or even do more than that. But we have not done that yet. We used to sign some agreement with Uber and Lyft like 3 years ago to provide some service last mile, first mile for 5 light rail stations. At that time, they provide about like 6,000 rides, and we give them $5 for each trip they provide. It was very successful, but the funding was limited at that time. We would like to pick up on that, in the near future.
Great. Okay, so got a couple of kind of logistical questions that have come in. One of them is just who maintains the bikes and the charging infrastructure, cleaning, troubleshooting, etc.? I'll start with that one.
That's on Jump as the license agreement. They have to clean around our stations. If there's neglect or if we notice something, they have to respond to that. That's required to them.
Cool. Okay. And then I guess the first one is just how do you manage the bikes at the location where the person is starting from, for the first mile to the station? What's happening there?
Yeah, so and that's an interesting question because the Jump Bike is more focused, while it's expanded to larger geographical area, it's more focused on the downtown and the closer downtown core. And so it doesn't go a ton farther out along our system. And so we're either seeing people who are in Folsom riding to a park and ride and then catching Jump when they get downtown as their connection downtown and having their car as an option, or riding their own personal bikes to the train, but we have a high floor light rail system, so it's not as accommodating to bicycles yet. We're in the process of replacing our light rail, all of our vehicles with low floor that will make it much more attractive to do so, to bring bicycles on. But right now you have to walk them up. If they're crowded in the morning, it's not as viable of an option. But yeah, and that's where we hope that maybe the Gotcha group will be also, another option for those individuals who are kind of coming in from the outer areas.
Great. Okay, I have a couple of questions. People are asking about the FTA funding that you mentioned, and just what that was, what it was used for. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of the program?
Yeah, it was just, so as we expanded light rail in Sacramento, because FTA helped fund the starter line, the various extensions, we had to seek FTA concurrence before we could move forward with installing these on at our stations. And so we had to seek their approval, and we did and got it granted.
Okay. So let me just make sure I'm clear. So you weren't saying that this was funding for this particular project. You're saying it was because of the light rail.
Exactly.
Okay. Right.
And just to further clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris and Henry, I don't think that SAC RT spent $1 directly on this. Maybe indirectly with press and things like that. But I believe, did you cover your costs with that $1,000 fee plus the utility fees?
Not necessarily, but I think this is necessary, cost we needed to spend to improve the mobility options for our customers.
Okay. I do have one question here about just how this kind of program can serve some, certain disadvantaged communities. Folks that don't have smartphones, that kind of thing. I know that's of course a typical issue with apps for transit. So can you talk about that aspect a little bit?
That's a very interesting question. 3 years ago, when we implemented our mobile apps, we were worried about that. But it turns out, more than 90% of our residents, they have the mobile phones. So really, implementing the mobile apps did not really affect the disadvantaged communities much. Right now, I believe more than 90% of the residents, they have the mobile phones. So that does not really hurt, affect, the equity.
Yeah, we learned some interesting lessons when we launched our microtransit program. We converted an existing dial ride in the city of Citrus Heights, which is a more senior population. And because they were used to calling in, they tended to use the call-in method quite a bit as opposed to using the mobile app. But when we expanded it to a disadvantaged community, more low-income, multiple languages, we actually saw a much higher adoption of using the mobile app for our microtransit. So it's been interesting. Just on equity issues, I know I talked about the low-income program that Jump has, but I think I failed to mention that the city also has a program. Should somebody leave a bike or a scooter that's blocking access of a sidewalk, that individual who left that scooter, last person to ride it, can be fined up to $15 by the city. And they're starting to enforce that more and more because we are seeing them where they're blocking accessible, paths, and we want to make sure that that's not the case.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. We know that's a general issue. So some of these programs.
That's true. And actually, the people here in Sacramento, they behave very well in terms of using it. And you guys know in China, scooters, were scattering everywhere because they eventually kind of collect that. Here, the Jump bike, we don't have that situation.
That's good to know. They're very polite there. Okay, so here's kind of a liability question. Is Jump liable for any injuries, or do people ride at their own risk, and are there helmets encouraged or provided?
I don't think they're required to have a helmet unless they're under 18 years old. Jump bikes can be ridden on the sidewalks unless posted that they can't. Scooters in Sacramento must be ridden in the street. I have to go back and look at it, but I believe there's an indemnification clause in there so that we would not be held liable on this. But I'd have to pull up that specific provision to look at to quote you. But yes, I believe that's included in our provision to make sure we're held harmless.
And I'll just add for the question about helmets. As far as I know, one of the first micromobility service I know of that provides helmets is Revel, which is like a shared moped service that just launched in Washington, D.C. and has a few other markets as well. I'm not familiar with Jump, Lime, or Bird providing helmets themselves to those who rent e-bikes and scooters that they offer.
Okay.
But they must post the safety at all of our stations as well and be clear with the users when they use them as well.
Okay. Okay, this question has to do with data sharing, and the questioner said they weren't sure if it got covered. I'm not 100% sure either, but I think it's a good question, so I'm going to put it out there. It just wants to clarify, how does the data sharing work? Is SAC-RT able to see or collect rider data, not identifiable data, but trip data that would help plan future routes? So I know you did talk a little bit about data sharing. Can you just, kind of clarify some of that about how that works with Sacramento RT and Jump?
Yeah, one of the lessons learned is we probably would have tried to get a better data agreement with them. But as you know, historically, the TNCs are very tight with sharing that data. So it was quite hard to get that. And, these bikes, obviously, they may be one ride at our, look at our station and a ride out to the place of employment, but that bike maybe doesn't come back to the station. It's a different bike. So the data's been a little bit hard to get. We have data on our, obviously our light rail ridership and APCs, but I think that's saying lesson learned. We would have tried to push for a little bit more data sharing from Jump in the future, and that's in future agreements. We'll try to seek that, knowing that it's an uphill battle to get them to share that.
This has been a common theme in our pilots of the month. Transit agencies have pretty much across the board said if we could do it over again, we would have negotiated the data sharing agreement up front ex ante before launching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Let's see. So the question is, do you think that this kind of service, or that a provider like Jump would be interested in serving a lower density or rural area? So is it applicable in a different, kind of environment?
That's exactly why gotcha groups come into the suburbs. or the lower density communities is because Jump Bike did not want to enter in there, so they had to seek some other companies. And so that's why we're interested to learn some lessons from a more suburban bike share where the densities aren't maybe as high. It's a little bit more of a sprawling road network. And how will people use that and interact with our system? And we're excited to learn those lessons when that launches.
Great. Sounds good. All right. Well, on behalf of APTA, I'd like to thank our presenters, Henry Lee, Chris Flores, and David Zipper. I want to make sure you all check out the Mobility Innovation Hub for the slides and materials from today's webinar. For our September Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month webinar, we've actually invited Kansas City to talk about their microtransit program, and we have confirmed that it's September 26th. Is that right? September 26th. So mark your calendars, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good.